What started as ancient scrolls written by the wisest of mankind and copied by hand has evolved into the knowledge of the world in the palm of your hands. Books are arguably nothing short of magic, allowing you to travel through time and live the lifetimes of those before you, learning from their mistakes, feeling their emotions, and living their lives. In fact, books take it one step further, transporting you into worlds that don't exist, created with the sole purpose of enchanting and engaging you. It is said that only God has the power to create a universe, but we now know that writers have this power too. Okay, maybe that's a little bit much, but here's the truth. Books are definitely a great tool. They help you experience the world through the eyes of other people. Maybe you've been trying to read books for a long time, for years, but there's always been some sort of barrier that has stopped you from becoming an avid reader. In this video, I'm just going to talk about how I went from reading no books at all until the age of 21 to suddenly picking up 2, maybe 3 books each week, sometimes finishing entire books a day. And the process is actually easier than you think. It starts with one simple question. Why? If you're watching this video, then the truth of the matter is you don't really know why you want to read. If you did, you wouldn't be watching this video, you'd be reading a book instead. Hear me out. If you really want something, right, then you would just do it. There's no need to search for an extrinsic motivator for that thing. For example, if you really enjoy watching football, and there's a match on, you wouldn't have to look up a video on how do I watch football matches. You would just watch it because this is something you really want to do. You wouldn't even think twice about it. In the same way, if you understand why you want to read books, then there's no need for any quick fix or weird technique. If you really understand why you want to read books, then you would just do it. Now let me ask you something. Is reading really something you want to do, like from the bottom of your heart? Or do you just want to do it because it's one of those vague goals that will change your life, like eating healthy or working out or reading, When you believe you have to do something, you're less likely to actually want to do it. This is why I never force myself, especially when I'm trying to create new habits. I never say, I want to read 1 page each day, or I want to finish this book this week. That's never really a goal in my head. Because now if you meet the goal, you'll just think, oh, I have to do this all over again next week. And if you don't meet the goal, you'll just be disappointed in yourself. So instead, it makes more sense to just read whenever you want. But the key word there is want. So to find your want, you need to ask yourself why. And there are a few ways to answer this why question. One of the best ways is to find a motivator that resonates with you. This motivator should not be vague. It should not just be like, oh, it'll change your life. It'll make you rich. It'll get you a better job. It'll connect you with more people. It needs to be very specific into what reading will do for you. Maybe it'll entertain you. Maybe you have a topic that you're really curious about and you want to refine those ideas. Or maybe you want to learn something completely new and you can only do so through the experiences of other people. Whatever this why is, make sure to find it, and then you would not have to worry about having any other motivator or setting up schedules or creating these weird timelines. None of that is required because now you know why you want to read. And if you go through this process of asking yourself why and you don't find an answer, that is completely okay. You don't have to read. You don't need to beat yourself up about just being someone that's not receptive to reading. In the age of the internet, you can find this information everywhere. You don't have to read physical books. You can listen to podcasts, you can watch YouTube videos, you can watch summaries. Obviously, there'll be different levels of depth, and probably going to the main source, which is the book, is the best way to get 100% of the knowledge. But you can get 80% of it from other secondary sources. But the problem here is that most people have this false belief that they're not readers. They have this false identity in their heads, and the next step will help address that. You might think the next step is asking yourself, how can I read more? But actually, it's another why question. Why am I not reading more? What is stopping me? If you really want to read but are not able to, then that's probably because there is some fundamental barrier in your way. I call these barriers friction points. They make tasks unnecessarily hard for no reason. There are usually 2 types of friction points. The first is friction of the mind, which means there's usually some kind of mental barrier that's stopping you from fulfilling a task that you really want to do. This could be a lapse in knowledge or a lapse in skill. And these can usually be addressed by learning more about the subject, by going deeper, by honing in your skills. The second is friction of the heart, and this one is a little bit more complicated. Friction of the heart just means that you're striving for something you don't really find meaningful. It's something that someone else has forced you to do, either consciously or subconsciously. Societal pressure, peer pressure, some external pressure. And no matter how disciplined you are or how hard you work, you're going to need a lot more effort to overcome this hurdle, unless you align the goal to your heart. And that's what the first part was all about. This is what finding your why is all about. Because if you don't do this, even if you're able to force yourself to read, a couple chapters every single week, you'll still not be satisfied at the end because it's not something you really want to do. It's going against your heart. So what were my friction points in my reading journey? The most important friction point that I faced was trying to keep up with these classically recommended books, these books that everyone says they're must-reads, right? It's a very hard starting point, and every time I tried to read those books, I felt kind of overwhelmed and I gave up. The second friction point that I faced was when I've been reading a chapter for a while and I don't know when it's going to end, it's kind of discouraging. I felt like, I've been reading for so long, I haven't made any progress, I'm just going to give up mid-chapter. And the next time I want to pick up that book, I would not remember, where I gave up. So then I'd have to start the chapter over and start skimming through, and it felt like too much work. The third friction point, it's kind of a small one, but I realized I like reading laying down. And when I lay down, I sleep on my side and I have the book like this, and it's really cumbersome with a physical book. This made me want to just give up and go to bed rather than try to read, even if it was an interesting book. It was really cumbersome to kind of hold the book in weird angles and things like that. All these friction points came together and made it really difficult for me to become a reader. In fact, it solidified the idea in my head that I am not a reader, I'm not cut out for understanding information through books. And as soon as this becomes a part of your identity, it's a lot harder to break out of this idea. I call this the identity feedback loop. So this is how the loop starts, right? When you're young, you have these microscopic preferences towards specific actions. These actions are usually recognized by your peers and your parents. They say, oh, this is something you're good at, or this is something you're bad at. And then this is what you start telling yourself. You tell yourself, hey, I'm good at this thing, and I'm bad at this thing. And the more you tell yourself this, the more other people will say, hey, you're good at that thing, or you're bad at that thing. And this kind of builds an identity in your head that becomes a loop. Because every time someone tells you you're good at something, you want to work hard to maintain that identity, so you automatically become better at that thing, which automatically leads to people recognizing you more. So this starts cementing in your mind, and your strengths and weaknesses just become a result of what you've told yourself and what other people tell you. And this is something that's really hard to break out of. You need to chisel away at all that cement that's been setting for years. It's very hard to say you're good at something that you know you're not good at, and it's very hard to say you're bad at something that you know you're good at. But it's actually a lot easier to just say, I don't know whether I'm good at something or bad at something until I do it consistently. So I'm not going to make up my mind based on past experiences. I'll just do this thing now and see where I stand in the present. So for me, growing up, I showed a lot more interest in things like sports and things like board games and other hobbies, but not a lot of interest in reading. So automatically my parents always felt that I should be reading more, especially in comparison to my sister, who used to read so many books every week. She would spend a lot of time reading. They would say, you won't be as smart as her if you don't read. Then as a kid, you always want to rebel against your parents. So I started telling myself, I'm just not a reader. I learned through other modes of information transfer. So then I started publicly telling people, hey, I'm not a reader. Even in class, when books were recommended for the class, I would just watch videos about that book rather than reading that specific book. And I would tell my friends, hey, I'm not a reader, I find them boring. I'd rather learn in other ways. And the more I told myself this, the more I believed that I was just not someone that could understand books. There's actually an interesting study that supports this idea of identity and how it affects your performance. So in this study, Asian American women were split into 3 groups and were asked to take a math test. The first group was a control, and they were not primed with any information beforehand. The second group was told one single sentence before their test. They were told, oh, you're a woman, well, good luck with your test. The third group was also given just one single sentence. Oh, you're an Asian, good luck with your test. And the results are kind of surprising. The control group did in the median. The group that was primed with their ethnic stereotype actually did better than the control, and the group that was primed with their gender stereotype actually did worse than the control. So this just kind of goes to show the power of what we believe about ourselves and what other people believe about us. The only way to break out of this loop is to kind of reset it completely. Start at 0. For example, for reading, I said, okay, I didn't like to read when I was a kid because of these specific reasons, but I don't know whether that's the case now. It was especially helpful once I realized I already read a lot. I scrolled through Reddit and blogs and all of these forums on my phone, which is, in essence, consuming content through written language. And that's what books are as well. In fact, because books don't change their topic at the speed at which, Reddit posts or blog posts do, it would be a lot easier to process that information in a meaningful way. Okay, now we've shed this false identity, right? The next step is to directly eliminate each friction point. For me, the solution was very simple. It was to buy a Kindle, because it solved all 3 friction points in one go. First, it gave me access to a wide variety of books, and I could scroll through and find more books for me based on the recommendations. Second is, while I'm reading, under each chapter, it would say, 10 minutes left in this chapter. It gave me an idea for how long I would be reading based on my pace, so that I can kind of time the end of the chapters when I want to go to bed. And third, it made it super easy to just lay on my side when I'm reading. That's just something that I care about, I don't know why. You may have different friction points. So to find your own friction points, the test is super simple. All you have to do is pick a book you like, which I'll go over in the next step, and just start reading. Whenever you feel like you want to stop reading, take a break and note down why you feel like you want to stop reading, whatever the reason is. Let me go over some of the common friction points that I've gathered just from talking to a few people that have been trying to read. The first is actually one that a lot of people don't see, they don't identify it, and it's hidden in plain sight. You're actually consuming a lot more information than your brain can handle. So it's too busy consuming and processing information that it doesn't care about, that when it comes to information that it does care about, it's unable to pay attention. So think about this, right? When you want to take a break and you go on some sort of social media app, that is not giving your brain a break, it's just bombarding you with new information and content. Even if you're just laying down and not thinking about it, subconsciously your brain has to process every bit of new information. So now if you go back to trying to read a book again, it needs to continue to keep processing this information with no break at all. So if you find that you're unable to process information that's actually meaningful to you, you might need to go on a low information diet. This just means learning to filter out information that's irrelevant, unimportant, or unactionable. Another kind of common friction point is you might feel like your progress is too slow. You might feel like, oh, I'm not getting through this book fast enough. I should, know how to read. I've been reading since I was a kid, and I've been learning to speak, whatever language since I was a kid. But you need to treat reading as a separate skill from language in general. And as a separate skill, you need to kind of build it up slowly and start practicing, but only if you want to. Because the problem that people face is they come up with this new goal and they want everything to be perfect. They set up these lofty kind of expectations of themselves. They say, I want to finish this book by the end of the week, and I want to just keep reading every free second that I get. This is not how your brain works, right? You can't suddenly jump into the deep end of the pool. This is actually called the Olympic fallacy. It basically says you need to learn how to float before you can win an Olympic gold in swimming. So what all this means is just take it slow, right? There's no rush. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Just pick a book that you like and take it really slow. It's fine if it takes you 2 months to read your first book. It doesn't matter. No one's sitting with a little checklist saying, oh, okay, the first time it took him 1 week and the second time it took him 5 days. It's not a race, right? Just take it slow. The idea is to read, not to read fast and not to kind of push yourself. Because why? No, seriously, why? There's no reason to do that. If you're forcing yourself to do something in this way, and you're trying to kind of discipline yourself, you actually run into a false friction point that a lot of people encounter. They feel like they don't have time, right? I want to read, but I don't have time. I have all these responsibilities. This is a false friction point because you usually have time to do all the things you want to do. If you want to spend time with your family, you have that time. If you want to sit down in front of the TV, you have that time. If you want to play a sport, you have that time. So you do have time to read. It's just about whether reading is a priority to you or not. And if it's not, that's completely okay. Like I said before, you have to stop forcing yourself to do things just for the sake of doing them. So the time friction point should take care of itself once you've gone through the step 1 and step 2. So let's talk about the next step, right? It's about finding a book that actually makes it easy for you to read, that makes you enter the flow state and completely get immersed in it. So finding books that are interesting to you is actually very easy. Look at what you already consume. Look at the movies that you watch, or look at YouTube, or look at Reddit, or look at all the content that you're currently consuming and try to take note of what the most prominent topics are. You can probably find these topics just by thinking, what am I interested in? What am I passionate about? And this is a good starting point to find books. Instead of trying to read the classics like War and Peace or Macbeth, try to find books within your specific niche because that would make it so much easier to turn the pages. For example, for me, I got really into perfumery sometime last year, so I started reading this book called The Diary of a Nose. And I really enjoyed it because it was something that I was interested in, something that I was interested in learning more about. I started reading reviews, watching videos, seeing what other people thought of the book, and then I just picked it up and started going through it once I was convinced that the topics within this book would resonate with me. So all you have to do is find a relatively short book in some topic or some niche which you enjoy and try it out. And don't feel guilty about kind of letting go of the book midway if you're not thoroughly enjoying the topic, because this is not some kind of test, right? You're allowed to let go in the middle and pick another book. In fact, here you go, right? I'm giving you formal permission to read as many pages of whatever book you want and stop in the middle and go to another book. It doesn't really matter. If you're truly enjoying the book, you won't get this need to stop. But if you're not enjoying the book, that means that that book is just not for you. Go on and read something else. Take all this pressure off your shoulders. So we're kind of approaching the end of the video, but I want to say something just a little bit controversial here. And especially for a book video, right? You won't hear a lot of people passionate about books say this, but books won't change your life. If you've done all the work, asked yourself why, tried to get rid of the false identity, understood your friction points, searched for a book you love, and tried to put in some hours reading that book, and you still haven't made any progress, zero progress, you're back to where you started, that's okay. That just means books aren't for you. You don't have to do everything that other people define as useful or as something that'll change your life, right? Don't let other people set your goals, whether consciously or subconsciously. Set your goals for yourself based on what you really want. Take some input, understand the benefits and the consequences, do a little bit of experimenting and prototyping and trying things out. But if those things fail at the end, that's good. That just means you found something that doesn't work for you and you can move on to something else instead of trying to force yourself and fit a square into a circular hole. Why? Remember that books are just one tool, just one of the many tools that you have available in the toolbox. Let's say you are a screw, right? And books are like a hammer, and you're surrounded by a bunch of nails, and all these nails respond really well to the book. They say, this is the tool for you, this is the tool that worked the best for me, and this is one that you have to use. And you spend your whole life trying to work with this hammer, right? And you never even consider the screwdriver right next to it, because the hammer is what everyone recommends. But this hammer is completely useless to you, because you are a screw. This is how you're made. This is your unique growth mechanism, your unique learning mechanism. And it is very important for you to choose the screwdriver, even though no one else around you is using the screwdriver. Because you need to find what drives you. Literally, find what drives you. Whether this is podcasts or whether it's YouTube or whether it's Reddit or any source of information, find one that motivates you the best and that connects with you and really resonates with you, and stick to that. As long as you're working on moving towards something that you want and something that you're passionate about, it doesn't matter what method you use to kind of reach this goal. I do want to make another video about why I've since slowed down my reading, because I'm trying to develop more of an action bias, which means doing things rather than just reading about things. And I'll see when that video is ready. But for now, this is kind of all I wanted to talk about. And if you are watching this, I hope it kind of connects with you, and I hope it helps you read a little bit more. And if you don't want to read a little bit more, I hope it helps you feel comfortable with the idea that you are okay the way you are, and you don't need to force yourself to do anything. So I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.